of the Arch of Titus, from Rome to Jerusalem and back, edited by Professor Stephen Fine and about to be published by Brill and YU Press. Today are two of the essay authors in this important book. From Israel, Professor Galit Hasan-Rokem, the Grunwald Professor of Folklore at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, and from Pensacola, Florida, Professor Marie-Therese Champagne of the University of West Florida, both in conversation with Professor Fine. I want to take this opportunity now to thank all of you for joining us. The scholars will be in live conversation with YU undergraduate students of Professor Fine's course of the same title, Rome, Jerusalem, and back, which is part of the Strauss Center for Torah and Western Thought at YU. I'm Alex Friedman, and I'm one of the students in this course. Let me now turn this program over to my professor, Stephen Fine.
Thanks, Alex. Hi, everybody. Welcome. First of all, welcome to YU. Welcome to our guest. This is a very special event because we have spent as a group 15 weeks thinking about the Arch of Titus, thinking about monuments, thinking about historical things that some of us had never thought about before, reading articles by scholars around the world, including our guest today. And so I'm so grateful to Professor Champagne and Professor Hasan-Rokem from two different sides of the world for being interested and joining us and sitting and talking to us about the Arch, about the meaning of the Arch for our time, about their own articles, because it's one thing to read people's writings, it's another, but you know, when we read the writings, we never quite know who we're talking to and who we're listening to. The amazing thing that we're able to do today is come together with the people that we've been studying, and that's a great privilege and a gift. So I thank you both. And so we're going to, each of our students is going to introduce himself, tell everybody about what he does, and ask questions, and we're going to start a conversation. When our students are finished, we're going to have the possibility of asking questions. Our student Jeremy Perot is going to be running the chat, and that's the story, and that's what we're going to do for the next hour together. So first of all, welcome Galit, welcome Marie, welcome students, and welcome community. So here we are. Shimon, who's first?
I guess I can go first. My name is Shimon Morgenstern. I'm from Scarsdale, New York, and I'm studying finance.
Cool. And whose question's going to go first?
I believe I'm starting it off.
Benjamin.
Hi, I'm Benjamin. I'm a political science and history major, also at the Strauss Center. Something that we've discussed really at length over the course of the semester is the evolution of symbols. How a symbol could start off meaning one thing, and over time it will come to mean something else. I was wondering, granted that a symbol could gain an additional meaning, but do you think that it's possible for a symbol to ever truly lose its original meaning? I want to hear specifically what Professor Champagne has to say about this, because I think in your article, the evolution of the arch from a Roman symbol to a Christian symbol, I think like this is a prime example of this phenomenon. So how do you think that this duality works?
All right. Would you like me to answer now?
Marie, please.
Yes. All right.
We'll all chip
Hello. Hi, Benjamin. I think that the meaning of symbols is always in the eye of the beholder, right? People can look at the same symbol and take away many different meanings. And it's a good question you have about, can a symbol lose its meaning over time? Specifically the Arch of Titus, I hope not, because I'm a historian, and that's close to my heart. but I think it depends on the passion that's connected to a symbol also. You know, surely the McDonald's golden arches are a symbol, but I'm not really passionate about McDonald's, right? So I think there are many, many factors in that. And, you know, in art, there's a term called syncretism, where a well-known image takes on a new meaning. And I think the Christian appropriation of the arch in the Middle Ages didn't change its meaning long term.
Galit, you've written about the Star of David and its transformations until it became the symbol of the state of Israel, which I think feeds into Benjamin's question about the long-term efficacy of exactly these kinds of symbols. Am I right?
Thank you. First of all, thank you for inviting me to this crowd. It's very interesting to see you turn the written into oral, because I'm usually very interested in the turning of the oral into written in rabbinic literature. But regarding the evolution of the symbols, maybe I won't answer this question from the point of view of the Star of David, but more from a theoretical perspective, that the great symbols of culture very often are totally ambiguous and polarized in their sense. Let's take very simple symbols. Fire. Fire may be the symbol of love or of destruction. Water may be the deluge that kills and destroys, and may be the absolute minimum for life, right? So the great symbols are very often very polarized and ambivalent. And I would say that the changes in symbols on that level are not linear, but they're cyclical. It's constant movement of changes rather than changes from A to B, is that the symbol maintains all the potentials, but different performances of the symbol use different semiotic, maybe semiotic potentials embedded in those symbols. So I don't know if it answers your question, but they are accumulative, and they, like language, they lose some and they add some. The Magen David, the Star of David, is a special case, and it's historically so linked to the present. So I think I won't go into that today. But you're welcome to read the essay in the journal Images.
Cool. Who's next?
Hello, I'm Kyle Seidel. I'm from Woodmere, New York, and I'm a computer science major in Yeshiva University as well. And my question today is also discussing in a similar vein towards Professor Champagne, where you wrote in your article that something we discussed in the course, that the church in medieval times promoted the idea of having vessels from the temple. So I was wondering if you could discuss a little bit more and elaborate on why the church would promote this idea of having the vessels, and sort of the broader implications that it has for today, why the church promoted these ideas.
Oh, that's a great question. And I think for the answer, you need to read my dissertation. But because that's what I wrote about, power and authority of the papacy in the 12th century. And I believe this promotion of the idea, which was done through liturgical gestures, texts, mosaics on the front of the Lateran porch, this association of the Lateran with Judaism was done in many different ways, many different modalities, because of course, not everybody can read, right? And a text is only going to be read by a select few, probably clergy. The 12th century is a period in which the papacy was gaining in power. And of course, you learn about the Gregorian reform, at the end of the 11th century. But then there's a tremendous conflict going on between the Holy Roman Emperor and the papacy, and then between the popes and kings over power. Who has the authority to tax? Who has the authority for power? And I think that the appropriation and the kind of the promotion of this idea that the church had the temple vessels was part of the whole ball of wax, the papacy trying to assert authority. Most people don't know, but there were several popes run out of Rome by crowds in the 12th century. There were some horrific things going on. We'd be stunned if this stuff happened today. Different factions were vying for power. So I think it was part of a whole program. And maybe it was not so much a conscious program that we're going to do this, but all of these things kind of gave the same meaning. Okay. And you see the result of it today, because I still have people ask me at conferences to go, and since I'm Catholic, to go and find out where the vessels are in the Vatican. And I said, I have no power. I mean, what do they think I can do? But there is still a very strong belief that the vessels are there. And, that's something you can discuss forever and never come to a resolution on it.
Well, we spent a lot of time on that one because, I spent a lot of time on that one. These kinds of rumors, as Galit's written about it, just spread and spread and spread. It's sort of like Jews having horns. People who want to believe that the menorahs at the Vatican are going to believe the menorahs at the Vatican, but it has nothing to do with the Vatican. There's a lot to do with them.
Yeah.
Can I weigh in on this?
Yes.
This is a question, Marie, since I haven't worked on the medieval development, but isn't the taking over the vessels part of the process of the supersession, taking over the authority of the Bible, taking over, Judaism is over and now Christianity reigns. So the vessels are a very strong symbol of power and of authority. And I think there is also a division in the Christian world, because on one hand, you have the Catholics who believe that, and some Jews also believe that the vessels are in the Vatican. But on the other hand, there are evangelical people who are walking at this moment in the Dead Sea desert with metal detectors looking for the treasures. Because of the copper scroll. I don't know if you mentioned the copper scroll in your discussions, Steve, but the
Absolutely.
copper scroll reads like a list of a treasure hunt, right? So this treasure hunt is actually going on. And while I'm talking to you, I get a push from the Hebrew newspaper Haaretz that somebody has just managed to resuscitate a date from the second, from the late antiquity by I don't know what they do physically with this date garinim, Steve?
Seeds
that they find. So it's on one hand it's a historical question. On the other hand, it's a very, very present, relevant question. What belongs to whom?
When I first heard that people were claiming the menorah was at the Vatican, I walked up to Galit's teacher and my teacher, Dov Noy, and I said, "What's going on here?" And he looked at me and said, "Well, you should go find out, but this is really new. And you should see what's going on here. This is going to be interesting." And it turned really interesting. Right?
Yes.
Cool. Shimon, who's next?
I think Ethan's up next.
Yeah. So hi everyone. I'm Ethan Avizadeh. I'm an economics major and I'm from Long Island. So besides the Arch of Titus, like you've obviously studied some other artifacts in your careers. So can you just talk about how the Arch of Titus relates to other historical artifacts that you've dealt with?
Galit, do you want to go ahead? Or do you? Okay. Well, I'm not an art historian, but I do bring a lot of images into my classes, because to me, the images and the text go together. Right now, what I'm working on is some manuscripts. I'm working on the circulation of a text from the 12th century from Rome all around Europe and the copying of it. And in one sense, the Arch of Titus, the menorah, even the legends about what happened to the temple treasures, they're a part of this circulation, this communication of knowledge, whether it's correct or not, that's going on. And you know, the popular idea is that in the Middle Ages, nothing happened, so it's worthless. Don't even think about it. But as a medievalist, I can tell you a lot went on. And so there's a lot of communication going on. And so texts also are spreading these ideas or spreading this supersession idea, as Galit said. And so that's primarily the only other objects I've dealt with. Is right now I'm working more on manuscripts.
Ethan, do you want to follow up?
Yeah, just so that to look in parallel at the temple vessels and relics, the relics of Christianity, which also distribute Jerusalem. It's the famous, I think in Latin, the process is called translatio, to translate Jerusalem to the whole world, to bring sacredness, holiness from the center, from Jerusalem to every other place. First, it was Constantinople, the new Rome, the new Jerusalem, and there are replications, factual replications of Jerusalem in Constantinople very early on, 4th, 5th century. So Christian relics, of course, include pieces of the cross, bones of saints, etc., etc. This goes on in parallel. There is on one hand the temple vessels, on the other hand, typically Christian objects that are distributed.
That's a great point, Galit, and it's true. And what I was going to add is that the suggestion that the church promoted that even the Ark of the Covenant was in the main altar of the Lateran Cathedral in the 12th century, which is, I mean, it's kind of preposterous. But the idea is that what is more powerful than God? Who is more powerful than God? The ultimate power and authority is God, right? And if you have these objects that were so central to this worship of God, then you have access to the authority. It's kind of like the Raiders of the Lost Ark movie. If you've seen that, you all have seen that. You know, the Nazis.
Let me just add one more piece,
Mhm.
and that is, you know, all the 100,000 people who were in Meron the other day were going there to be near the relics, to be near Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai.
Yeah.
And you hear the strength of belief and wanting to be close to the holy.
Mm-hmm.
The Arch
Yeah,
of
I mean,
Titus
look
may
at
be something different. Let me just point out, because we did lose one student, a Shalavim student, in Meron, and this is a period of mourning. And I thought it was important to raise that parallel and just to bring our cognizance back to those people and their memory. Who's up next? Donnie.
Hi, I'm Donnie Shanzer. I'm majoring in economics, also at Yeshiva University. This is for Professor Rokem. So we spoke a lot about different myths and rumors in antiquity and beyond, like Titus and the gnat and the whole menorah, discussion of where it is. And you write extensively regarding myth and rumor in antiquity. And I was wondering, given this propensity for humanity to embellish and make up stories, what are practical ways, if any, in which we can prevent or mitigate these sorts of legends from being developed in the future?
If we can prevent legends to be distributed in the future, is that the question?
Or to debunk and sort of express how they came to be and why they're wrong.
Yeah. I think I'll be very cautious about speaking about the future, okay? What will happen, I don't know. But if we study myths and legends and rumors and sort of deconstruct them and look at what powers they embody and what kinds of beliefs they propagate, I think we can develop tools to critically look at the legends of our times. I mean, the famous, too much spoken of parallel of rumors political rumors in our time is fake news, right? Fake news, which is all over. Now, the big question is who defines what is fake news and what is true news? And now we, of course, by now know that it's all connected to power, to wealth, to charisma. What Steve mentioned before, wanting to be close to the source of sanctity, etc., etc. I think that we just have to develop critical minds to be able to look at the legends and the myths that are um, destructive, inhuman, um, uh, proliferate things like racism, inequality, etc., and look for the myths that um, foster the kind of thinking that we think is positive. I don't think we can make away with mythical thinking. It's a basic human need and wonderful capacity. Why would we make away with it? But I think that we have to develop a critical thinking, and that depends on our values. So there is no valueless study of literature, no valueless study of art, and no valueless study of the past. Hopefully, no valueless thinking about the future.
Can I add something to that, Steve?
Please.
Okay. All right. Yes, I totally agree. I think it's human nature. I mean, that's what happens. Think about stories about our families too. Just stories about personal, famous people. It's kind of innate in human nature to try to flesh out the story. And then in the retelling, these always take on more, a greater life. But critical thinking is the key. And that's what you guys, you all are supposed to be doing, right? And that's what we all try to do in our university classes, is to instill that skill in you so that you can be independent thinkers.
Since Steve mentioned Meron and the pilgrimage to Meron and the charisma and the need to be close, I'll just mention that it's the month of Ramadan just now in Jerusalem and everywhere else. Next Friday, there will be 100,000 Muslims congregating on Haram al-Sharif, the Temple Mount, Mount Moriah, call it what you want. There it will happen, 100,000 in a city, the population of which is barely 10 times that number.
Well, who's up next?
Judah's up next.
Judah.
Hi, my name is Judah Aronovitz. I'm majoring in mathematical economics. This is a little bit of a follow-up question now that we're on the topic of rumors. What do you think about the well-known myth about the gnat in Titus's head? And specifically, how do we distinguish between rumor and fact?
Galit. We've all read what you wrote.
Judah, if I would know how to distinguish between rumor and fact, I would take a patent on it. I don't think it's possible. I think what we can do is very carefully study in context, in a specific context, each rumor, and to take. I'm just now reading a big book on blood libels by historian Magda Teter from Fordham University, your neighbor, who traces very, very, very much in detail what she calls the trail of the legend or of the rumor, of the lie, of the falsification of the blood libel. It's very difficult. The question you're asking is very, very important because lives depend on it in every period. And it is a very difficult question. I don't think that we have, as historians or scholars of texts, the a very potent mechanism to really distinguish. What we can do is by comparison of very versions to see what is the most consistent elements, which are the elements that drop away. Like the first question that was posed to Marie about symbols, how do things change? But I don't think that consistency, by definition, proves that something is more true than the things that fall away. And
So
again,
every example has to be checked and
exactly.
checked and rechecked, which is one of the things we've seen with all of the overlays on the Arch of Titus, all the various ways people have looked, whether in the Middle Ages, or you could imagine one of the rabbis walking up and seeing Titus's big head and saying, ah, ha, 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 right? All broken, and pulling out the story of Titus and the gnat. Are these things that happened? Or are these things that give meaning to our lives or the lives of the people telling the stories? And this is the balance, Judah, right? This is what we've been doing a whole semester. But there is such a thing as closer to factuality and farther from factuality, right? And that's the other thing that we've been talking about.
Take the approach to Titus himself. By Romans, by Suetonius, the historian of the lives of the emperors, he's thought to be a beloved by the gods, a very positive figure. In every rabbinic text, when he's mentioned, it says Titus Harasha, or Shchik Etamia, whose bones will be milled or something. So it's a different perspective of the same figure.
Yeah. Could I comment? That is my favorite story. When I came across that in the Talmud, I was in the library working on research on it years ago, and I laughed out loud in the library. That's a wonderful story. And it's the story also of the people who were thought powerless were empowered. Look how Titus died, according to the story. And then the story of the chick, 2 pounds, that, all of this is so fantastical, but it's a wonderful story of overcoming power in ways that, wouldn't be expected.
Which in Jewish history is one of the major skills.
Yeah.
Learning how to deal with power, even when there is none, right? Who's up next?
I think I am, yeah.
V.
Hi, my name is Tzvi Gettenberg. I'm an English major from Long Island, New York, and I have a bit more of a theoretical question. So nowadays we see a lot of statues and monuments being taken down in America and all over the world. So although I don't think such a committee exists against the Arch of Titus, but how would you respond to a committee trying to bring down the arch? What is the most important reason to have a monument like this standing today?
This is so pertinent in every corner of America, right? I'm from New Orleans, where they've taken down so many Confederate general statues and changed the names of streets. The argument for leaving these things in place is that history is not changed because you took down a structure, right? Or you obliterated an image. It doesn't change the fact that it happened. And I think because it happened and because you have this proof that it happened, people can learn about it. I mean, to me, that's the greatest point of the Arch of Titus, is to learn about the horrific history of what happened to the Jews and what happened to Jerusalem and the temple. So, but it's a hot button issue all over in every community. It really is.
3 things about this question, which is very fascinating. One, there is a group that is lobbying for the destruction of the Arch of Titus. There is. I just saw it in the internet that there is a group because of the same reasons. Why would we glorify, et cetera, et cetera? The second thing that I want to say is that maybe I'll take it into another context. The fact that an object is there and is glorified needs to be framed. There needs to be a framing in order to revise our ideas about history, which is something that is worthwhile to do once in a while. You need to frame the objects rather than destroy them, I think. So instead of just destroying these sculptures, they may be moved to another space. The ritual behavior towards them could be changed, etc., etc. I think that just taking away things. I'm thinking about things happening in Israel, for instance. Think of the fact of the way that archaeology is conducted in Israel today. What are the things that are spared and what are the things that are taken away in order to reach a certain a certain stratum of archaeology that certain people want to glorify. So we are very often, in some places, erasing centuries of history in order to reach the second temple, in order to reach the first temple, etc., etc., which is a problematic, perspective of archaeology, because all those later strata have been there all the time, and there is a lot to be learned from them too. Yeah.
We found that in Rome as well, where the whole forum used to be a housing unit, and a man sold donuts under the arch during the 18th century. He scratched his name. And now it's completely a different thing, reconstructed, right, by a not so pleasant pope as a national monument to compete with the Napoleon. Mm-hmm. So the never-ending changes of meaning that goes with places of memory. It's what we've been talking about all semester, and it's quite astonishing. And if you take it away, Marie, then people will just look at the place without the object and respond that maybe in similar or different ways.
Can I give an example from something which seems different? In Germany, there is a place called Oberammergau, where they play every 10 years a horrific passion play, which is played in commemoration of a rescue from a plague. They vowed that if the plague will end, they will create this passion play, which is the story of the passion of Jesus, and it is very, very anti-Semitic. Now, after World War II, this question became, this whole issue became very sensitive. So they started to clean the version of the passion play and take away as much of the anti-Semitic contents as possible. I saw it about 10 years ago in the place, and I was looking at it and I was thinking, this is a problem. I don't have a clear answer to the question. I was thinking to myself, will people ever understand what power this passion play had for the medievals and for the early moderns, and how it created anti-Semitism if all the anti-Semitic content is taken away? By taking away the marks of history, you lose also a dimension of understanding what created hatred, what created oppression, etc., etc. So if you take away all the signs of slavery in the United States, it's also erasing Black history. And the history of oppression. So I think it's a very big problem and needs to be discussed.
And discussed and discussed and discussed, and that's part of the process. Who's next?
Me.
Go for it.
Hi, my name is Jeremy Puro, and I'm from Hollywood, Florida, and I'm majoring in biology and pre-med. So I was wondering, so in light of the project to essentially assign colors and to reconstruct the Arch of Titus in color, how has that contributed to your understanding of the Arch of Titus and the historical realities during that time period?
That one is 100% Steve's.
That's why I shouldn't talk. They've heard me say it over and over again. Look, once we have the color, we've changed it. We've owned it in a different way. There were people who were really angry that we changed it and owned it in a different way. It provides a view of what we like to think is something close to what it originally looked like, but that might not be the most important way that it looks, right? And we've talked about all of those complexities, which goes back, Galit, to do we destroy, do we change, how do we imagine? Some of our guys have asked me, what if we repainted the Arch of Titus? And my response was, yeah, but maybe I'm wrong. This is this minute. And so the ability to project it is what allows us to imagine. And in 5 years, someone is going to make it better. I can guarantee it. The amazing thing is that color has become a question of race in America, right? What shades are all those people on the arch? It's because they're certainly not lily white. And we've talked about the implications, and we've watched Mary Beard and others really passionately talk about these issues. So it's always much more than just the color. It's about perception. It's about our own ownership or disconnectedness, I think. Who's next?
Maybe ask a follow-up.
One small thought. Color it has to do is parallel to voice, in the sense that we use the traditional canonized modes of transformation or of transmitting knowledge tend to try to bring everything to one voice, ergo one color. And many colors is like bringing into text many voices. From that point of view, I think it's to make it more alive and more like ourselves than the classical white pictures or sculpture.
Cool. Has everybody asked a question, guys?
I personally have not yet.
All right, Shimon, and then Kyle, how should we do this? Kyle, do you want to follow up and then Shimon?
Yeah, I guess I just had a small follow-up question on this. We were discussed in class also that some people have a hesitancy to see the marble statues in Rome and all over that they originally were painted. I was wondering just your initial impression, I guess, also if you had this reluctance also to, disassociate them as being white marble, or were they really painted? Just wondering about your guys' reaction to, I guess, that hesitancy.
Well, look, when you did the Coursera course, you saw the assignment. For those who don't know, we did a Coursera course on the Arch of Titus that all of our class members have participated in. When we first did the course, I asked each participant to imagine the colors of the arch. I can't tell you the beautiful things people colored with magic markers and crayons and sent to us. There is a limitation of imagination that takes place once we've actually done it, which is why I haven't changed that part of the course, right? And I've been ambivalent about changing it. Because I really do want, I had a student, a YU student, who put the Romans in blue and yellow. And I looked at him, I said, look, you've turned the Romans into the Minnesota Vikings. And we wouldn't have thought of that otherwise. We wouldn't have played with those colors. And the imagination part is almost as important sometimes. As you know, our choice of colors were an imaginative decision.
Steve, could I add something? I was thrilled to see the color that you used. And I'll tell you why. The general public thinks that everything in the past was just drab, dirty stone, or cleaned after the millennium. But so many things were colored. The fronts of churches were painted, statues were painted, all of these things that the public today just has no idea about. They're shocked. First time I learned about that, I was stunned too, because I love the color, the stone. But it's much more accurate to see it with some colorization, right?
The first time I saw this, it was at the Getty Museum. There was a colorized statue of the Emperor Caligula. And I walked up to his head and I looked at the white head and I looked at the colorized head and I said, oh my God, this is why the rabbis of the Talmud were so upset about these things, because they were practically human. And I'd never understood, light bulb goes on, until I walked into that exhibition, even though I'd seen images, what they're talking about. There's a visceralness that comes with. And as soon as all you guys are back on campus, we'll put the lights back on Titus and you'll see it too. because as some people know, we have the reconstruction on campus now. Anybody else? Students?
Yeah, I'm up.
Shimon.
Yes. This is a specific question for Professor Rokem. What motivated you to find the deeper understanding and structure of rabbinic literature, especially with ones regarding Agada or Agada? Sorry.
You can go either way, it's fine. Galit, you have your.
Yeah. Sorry. I
Sorry, I
say
just dropped you.
very interesting question, and there is of course a long story, and I'll take the very short story. I think I grappled with many things in Jewish culture in the present, in the recent past, especially Shoah and destruction, and the destruction of European Jewry, etc. And I had a very strong sense that some things will be understood better if we look backwards, if we go to the early ones. But that's all rationalizations. It really took me by charm. It really, I was tempted into rabbinic literature. I fell in love with rabbinic literature. I already studied Talmud in high school, and I have to say I was in a labor movement high school in a place called Kirat Chaim, which is not typically a Talmud study place, but I had a wonderful Talmud teacher who was a neologist rabbi from Budapest, Rabbi Dr. Benny Morgenstern, Zichrono Livracha, and he just taught Talmud in a way that made it irresistible. So I came with that to study modern Hebrew literature and English literature, but it took over. And I had wonderful teachers at the Hebrew University, Dov Noy, Zichrono Livracha, that Steve mentioned, who taught me folklore, and Yona Frankel, Zichrono Livracha, who taught me rabbinic literature. So that helped. And it's such a rich mind, and it gives you so much material for thought. And there is also, I think, a political aspect, and it has to do with whose are these texts. I live in a state, a Jewish state, Jewish democratic state, in which there are strong powers that appropriate texts and own them, and close out others, especially women, from owning them, for interpreting them, for teaching them, etc. And I think I'm part of I'll use a German word, Kulturkampf, a fight, a struggle to make these texts owned by people like me, and I think creating a Jewish culture in Israel, in the world, that opens up the texts to many other people than those who traditionally have the monopoly on them. There is no monopoly on these texts. And what I want to show is that when the rabbis created the texts, they were not created from a monopoly. They were created from a big chorus of voices which takes in. And the great value of especially the Talmud, but also of the Palestinian Agadic Midrashim, is that they allow for the presence of women, of non-Jews, of non-educated Jews, or non-rabbinic Jews in the text themselves. It's all there. They didn't create a monologic text. They created a dialogic, multilogic, very rich text. So that's the short story.
Great. I think we have some questions from all of the folks who've joined us. So if you send a text, who's taking care of that? Jeremy, right? You're in charge of that? We have questions?
If anyone has any questions, please send them to
Or
me.
you know what? I'm going to do even better. Why don't we just open it up? We're a small group.
Right.
I'm just going to ask everybody to unmute. I just pushed the button, so that should work. And let's talk. Right. Marie, what brought you to study what you study? That's the question we haven't asked. I've
Okay.
wondered about for a long, long time.
Really? Well, I was a housewife with 3 little kids, and I saved and scrimped, and with my best friend went to Europe in 1995 for the first time. We were convinced we would never, ever make it back, and look what I'm doing now. Anyway, and the Arch of Titus absolutely floored me. I remember looking at it and just history came alive. It was just the one thing in that trip of all the things I saw that absolutely shook me to my core. And then I went back to school and got a master's and doctorate and ended up working on these topics that have to do with the Jewish-Christian relationship in the High Middle Ages. And the Arch of Titus comes into play in it. And it was years before I thought, well, wait a minute, no wonder I was working on the Arch of Titus, because each of us, Galit said it, Steve, I know you have this, we have a passion for certain things that we work on. And mine has really been to understand the Jewish-Christian interface in the Middle Ages. I've taught classes on the history of anti-Semitism. You know, I published on a Christian Hebraist in Rome in the mid-12th century. On the Jewish experience of Rome in the 12th century. And I'm fascinated with it. I've always been fascinated with that. So sometimes it's hard to explain, but the Arch of Titus really shook me the first time I saw it. That's what I can say.
Cool. Any other questions, comments, folks? This is your chance.
I think there are a few questions that were written into the chat.
Please. Jeremy, you're on.
So somebody wrote in the chat, the question is, what's the basis and is there any truth to the prohibition against walking under the arch?
I would love to have an answer to that.
The answer is no. It's something that was made up at the end of the 18th century. It's a romantic idea. My guess is that if Jews avoided the arches because they didn't want to be bothered by Christian tourists, as you know, the Jew who's walking by, or by people who wanted to missionize them. We have texts like that too. Oh, wait. Is my sound off?
No,
you're good.
Now you're on.
Yeah,
Was I on before?
Your
Yeah.
video.
Your sound was on.
We're good now, right?
Yeah.
Oh, good.
Yeah,
So
I had a professor in graduate school who was from New York. He was Jewish. He was an art historian, and he would tell the story in class that his mother always told him never, ever walk under the Arch of Titus when you go to Rome, because he was a
oh,
art
yeah.
historian. I mean,
The stories.
Big.
This is like a strange folk thing. The first thing I did was go to the Jewish community in Rome and say, do you know anything about this?
Yes.
And they went through, then they looked at me and said, we've looked, nothing, right? And then I found a 18th century newspaper where somebody said, you know, they say this in Rome that the Jews won't walk under it, but it's not true. They just stay away. I mean, today you can avoid walking under the arch with no difficulty. In fact, they don't let you. But that was only after 1823 when it was reconstructed the way it is now. If you went before that, it was just part of the fortress. And so if you wanted to go from side A of Rome to side B of Rome, right, you had to go through there and maybe buy donuts. I just point that out. Yeah.
I think it can be linked to a wider folkloristic belief that has to do with the danger. Do you hear me? I'm echoing. That has to do with the danger of going under things. I don't know if you know this very famous folk belief that it's dangerous to go under a ladder, right?
Yeah.
Some people will never go under a ladder.
That's right.
I mean, it's based on a realistic feeling that things may fall on you, especially if they're ruins and old.
It's true.
And there's that whole business of not giving honor to Titus, you know, Titus, right? The same reason my grandmother used to walk across the street and not go directly in front of the churches, right? There is this sense of geography that goes back to the Talmud. We can find it both in the Bavli and in the Yerushalmi, of not walking near certain things, right? Elisha ben Abuya got in trouble because his mother walked by a place that they were burning incense and smelled it, right? And that's what turned him bad. Going to some good places, going to places you shouldn't go.
There
Right.
is a tractate that devotes a lot of discussion. It's Avodah Zarah. What you, how you behave when you go close to something that may be infused with polytheistic power, charisma.
So the first time I spoke about this at the World Congress for Jewish Studies, all these now elderly professors walked up to me and said, you know, the first time I went to Rome, the first thing I did, I ran to see the Arch of Titus, right? Which is exactly the opposite response to what you're describing, because what repels also attracts.
It's true.
Students, this is your other questions?
Yes, I wanted to bring us back to the comparison of the Confederate monuments with the Arch of Titus. And I'm trying to figure out the best way to talk about that. I'll just relate, when I was in Rome and I first went to the Arch of Titus, I was very moved and I felt very affirmed as a Jew sitting there next to it, that my people's history and suffering was acknowledged, and the Jewish contribution to Roman glory, you know, by default, I guess you could say, you know, was being acknowledged there. African Americans feel very oppressed and distressed by Confederate monuments, and I support the effort to remove them. They are not relics of the Civil War. They are relics of the Jim Crow era, for example. And I'll just mention, I had something to do with renaming or taking the name of General Lee off of a redwood out here in California, where I am a professor of history and coordinator of Jewish studies at Fresno State. So I think that, you know, just like both of our visiting scholars were talking about the need for a specific look at the facts and the context of when you're determining whether something is real or fake news. I think that situational and contextual information is essential when considering what to do with monuments, whether to white supremacy or like the Arch of Titus that is commemorating a specific historical event. And, you know, and I don't know if somehow the time frame, like something that's with just 100 or 125 years old, that African Americans have had to walk by all these centuries, is different than something that's thousands of years old. But I do think that Jews should get in free to the Colosseum. That's my joke.
I believe in everybody getting in free.
Good point.
First of all, Dr. Fields, thank you for joining us. I see we're both graduates of USC.
Oh, okay.
Go Trojans.
Yeah.
And that's the statue that gets either gift wrapped to keep it from being stolen, or stolen by the UCLA people on a regular basis, right? So as one who saw the iconoclasm of the Tommy Trojan swiped, right? And I'm making light only because this is so serious. And how we deal with this in our world is so utterly serious, that everything you said, right? Especially the part of, no, not especially the part. The most practical part is the part about free admission, but the important parts dealing with how we deal with all those things that blight our landscape, right? And make people really sad. The fact that Jews continue to go back to the Arch of Titus is amazing. The fact that Levi Eshkol, the prime minister after 1967, wanted to build a Judea liberated arch in Jerusalem before they all looked at him and said, you know, that's a little old fashioned. We don't do that anymore. Says a lot. What we've done in our semester together is think about these issues through this very long mirror or speculum, and try to figure out both as it reflects us and how we can look through the microscope to see what was. Happily, the writings of Galit, Hasan-Rokem, and Marie Champagne have been guideposts for us for this entire semester. So I want to thank both of you for joining us today. And I want to thank our students for just making the room light up for all of us today. And Ethan, it's your turn. Eitan, it's your turn, right?
Yeah. So just some closing remarks. I want to again say thank you to Professor Champagne, Professor Hasan-Rokem, and Professor Fine for joining us today for this fantastic discussion. This is YU Voices, Prices and Hope, brought to you by the YU Center for Israel Studies, the Rabbi Arthur Schneier Program for International Affairs, the Bernard Revel Graduate School of Jewish Studies and Judaic Studies at YU. Goodbye and shalom from Yeshiva University.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Steve.